Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. This is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will talk about the challenges and triumphs of living with NVLD, that is nonverbal learning disability. And we will not only be talking about the challenges that I have personally, Jennifer Lynn Purcell, but also the challenges that other NVLDers have in their life with having that learning challenge. And I also like to broaden out to other learning challenges like autism and dyslexia and ADHD and Asperger's to try to be more inclusive and to compare and contrast the challenges that we all experience as neurodivergents. And I also try to include neurotypicals in it as well as terms of saying that they might experience similar challenges, but to different degrees than neurodivergents do. And to try to say, hey, this is how we can help each other with these challenges. I also wanted to let you know that I started a Patreon account for this podcast to try to get some more revenue from it. That's not the reason why I started this podcast, but I'm trying to get some revenue from the podcast because it will help me keep it going. So if you are willing to donate even $1 or $2 or $5, whatever amount is comfortable for you, to Patreon for Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, that would be appreciated. You can also use Spotify to donate money, and you can also use BetterHelp to donate money with clicking on the link and becoming a customer of BetterHelp. So those are 3 different ways you can support the podcast, and I hope that you will choose which way works for you, and that you will choose which level works for you as well. And I hope that you do it because the podcast helps you also, and that you are willing to support me in continuing to produce it. Thank you. Good morning and happy Friday, or maybe you're listening to this episode at a later time than when I recorded it. Do you ever get so tired of explaining yourself to others because of being neurodivergent, even to the ones you know want to help you? I don't know about you, but I often get tired of explaining what I'm trying to say to someone else because sometimes it's hard for myself to understand it. I'm trying to say that sometimes I have a hard time speaking and putting my thoughts into words. I'm not sure if this is a symptom of NLD or something else. And by that something else, I mean maybe I have more than just NLD. I think that the chronic migraine condition I have doesn't help because sometimes I am in so much pain that it's hard to make sense of what others say to me or what I'm trying to say to them. It's also tiring to explain why you need help with something to someone else or how they can help you. I feel like this is true even if they have helped you before, because sometimes I want to do it on my own and not be so much of a burden on them. I know that they don't want me to feel like it's a burden, but often it does for me because they have to work around my special needs and may have to rearrange their schedule to help me. The first article I would like to quote is titled, "You're Not a Burden" by Lydia Brown at Autistic Hoya, written in June of 2012, which is a while ago, but I still wanted to use the article. Quote, "And you are not a burden to society if you need any form of accommodation to navigate this world. The society in which we live was not constructed around the needs and experiences of people like you and me. In fact, it ought to be the basic minimum standard of human decency to ensure that you and I have equal access as everyone else, and sometimes that means making accommodations for us. If a person in a wheelchair wants to enter a building, there should be a ramp long before he or she ever gets there. And I should say they as well get there. And if a blind person wants to read a book, there should be an audio version long before they ever search for it. Because that's making the world accessible for everyone instead of keeping the world accessible only for a few. If I need written visual instructions with clear deadlines to do my job, there should be no argument about it. That's not me creating a burden. That's me demanding my equal right to full participation. There's no one correct way to do things or experience life. To exist differently in the world does not make you a burden on society. Society's burden is to compensate, however slowly, for its long train of abuses, disenfranchisement, marginalization, discrimination, dehumanization, and uh, parental, sorry, paternalism. No, paternalism, sorry. Perpetuated and perpetuated against those who have been denied power, equal rights, and self determination. That is the burden that society bears. End quote. Sorry, I messed up some of those words. I'm not very good at pronouncing big words, so I did my best. Thank you for writing this. Made my day. You are absolutely right. I realize I might need to change my self talk because I might be the person who is telling myself about being a burden rather than others. I might be putting words into their mouth without me ever telling them that I am. The second article that I want to quote is multiple long-term condition multimorbidity, making sense of the evidence. How comorbidity can impact on an individual's quality of life. People with multiple conditions are more likely to have poorer health, poorer quality of life, and higher risk of dying than those in the general population. Some combinations of mental and physical diseases are associated with especially poor outcomes. So, close quote, even though what this quote says may have some truth to it, I say to it, so what? Meaning, if I might have a poorer quality of life, doesn't stop me from trying to have a higher quality one. I will do whatever it takes to do so, and no one can blow out my fire even if they blow out my candle. That is a line from a song that I heard recently by Betty Who. The third article I would like to quote is titled Why I Quit. Autism, I've stopped saying I have autism. For me, being autistic is brilliant, not a burden, by Nick Raysom. Quote, I don't see being autistic as having a disorder. Instead, I look at it as a very positive thing. From a young age, it has helped me direct a laser-like focus on achieving my goals. My obsessive mindset and lack of real motivation to socialize accelerated my career in a way that would not have been possible if I had other interests. Achieving my ambitions would have been so much harder if I had not been autistic. but there is an increasing tendency to use language that demonizes this neurological difference. Phrases such as Nick has autism or Nick's autism makes me cringe, as they suggest an ailment that controls and burdens, which feeds into a narrative of struggle, disability, and a lack of agency. Others may feel differently. We are not a homogeneous group, and I recognize a lot of autistic people, particularly the nonverbal community, may have a different lived experience. Learning difficulties and other comorbidities can add an extra complication, but for me, there are plenty of associated positive associations with being autistic, which is why language is so important. Close quote. I also agree with Nick that language around neurodivergence and comorbidities needs to change. He is so right about our difference being more positive for us than most of society realizes. I would challenge the neurotypicals to ask us more about what they can do for us before they create something that they think will help us. They will save them This will save them time and energy on creating something that might only work for one of us, but not all of us. After all, when you meet one neurodivergent, you have only met one of us, meaning that we all have different needs due to what symptoms we experience, the degree to which they affect our lives, and how much energy we have already tried to put into them to make our life easier in those areas. I hope that this episode was helpful for you in some way, and that you were able to get some lessons and tips out of it. As always, I will provide links for you to the articles that I quote so that you can go and read them more if you want to. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag. on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website. And I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description. And I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. So I hope that episode was helpful to you and that you were able to get something out of it and it was meaningful for you, and that you can share that lesson with somebody else that you know who is neurodivergent or neurotypical and will be able to help you with that challenge that you feel like arises for you, or the lesson that you learned from the episode. And I hope that you take some time to journal about what thoughts or feelings came up for you while you were listening. And I hope that you can spread the word about NLD and being neurodivergent and try to spread the awareness with others as well. Thank you for listening to Living with Invisible Learning Challenge. Talk to you next Friday.